Hello, this is Applied Innovations class summary. So we had a series of lectures on how to innovate and lots of learnings from that class. And I wanted to summarize that class here. So the first question comes to mind is, who is this class for? And why do we need this class? And what do we learn from this class? So these are the three questions we're going to answer in this video. So why do we need innovation? We are in this world where there are lots of disruptions. Lots of things are changing at rapid pace. We call it the VUCA world, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. When lots of things are changing, you either need to adapt yourself, meaning innovate, or you will be left behind. And so the best way to handle disruption and changes is to innovate. And so there is no clear way to predict the future. Instead of figuring out like what will happen, how will the future unfold, it's actually best to invent the future that you want it to be. So that's what we're going to learn in this class. So why do we need innovation? Because there's lots of disruption. COVID has been the latest one, where a huge revolution around how people work. Commute is going to be the thing of the past. People have now tasted what it means to not have to commute, especially those people who can work remote. There's going to be a huge shift in terms of what expectations an employee has for their health improvement, for their overall work environment, how they work, how they connect. There's going to be lots of changes because of COVID, and it's going to be huge. And so as leaders, if we invent a better future, then we can actually be in more control. So it's for leaders. Innovation is for leaders who want to take charge and be part of forming the future. And how are we going to do this? We're going to do this with three ways. We're going to learn some tools. We're going to have those tools be part of our skill sets, and we're going to change our mindset. So this is going to be the key content. There are 10 areas where we will learn these three things: tools, skills, and mindset. It's going to break it down into 10 things. And each of these 10 areas are individually linked in the description. So if you want to just focus on each one of them, you can just go click straight into that section of this video. It's going to be a long video because I'm going to summarize this entire class in this one video. But if you are interested in any one of these at any point, you can just go straight to that section. So how do we go about innovation? And to summarize all of that in one video is going to be, we're going to use these 10 areas. First, we need to understand, where are we? What's the context? Then we need to reflect. What are we trying to innovate? Then we need to frame the problem. Then we need to have the right tools to innovate. Then we need to get everyone involved by interview process. Then we need to get a set of ideas on the table. Then we need to inspire people into action by the prototypes that we want them to build. And we want them to not only do that, but also we want us to get better. We want to improve our craft, and we want to actually do what gives us maximum joy and contribution to the society. I know I said a lot of things, and we're going to go into each one of them one by one. So let's get started. And you will see in the top right, this 0, and this will change. The numbers will change based on the section you're in. So you can follow along, and if the numbers are increasing, that means we are actually making progress from 1 to 10. So we're done when the slide hits 10. It's not the slide number 10, it's the section 10. So we are in section 0, which is context. Let's get into section 1. So context, right? So before we get into this topic of innovation, we need to understand innovation happens not in a silo. You and I cannot innovate individually alone. For you to work and innovate, you would need these three layers of improvement. The first layer is your individual layer, the inner layer. So this involves improving your inner skill sets, ability to communicate, ability to inspire, ability to tell stories, ability to be your authentic self. That's your inner development. So that's the first step that's needed. You need to get better at that. Self-awareness, presence, communication, leadership. So that's all your individual layer. Once you do that, and there's a specific course just to do this at Berkeley, it's called Leadership Communication, where you develop your individual self. Then the second layer, after you've developed your authentic leadership skills, you then get to working effectively with your team. And this context is important because once you are in a good state, you can actually give and contribute to your team. You can build trust. So there's another course at Berkeley which is called Building Trust-Based Relationship, which just focuses on how do you expand your innovation capability or your ability to have an impact beyond yourself, and that is to your team. And finally, once you are effective and your team is effective, and if you work across the team, across your organization, and the combination of all three is required for innovation. Because again, you cannot really produce anything in a silo. You need help from a lot of people to innovate, to bring your ideas to life. So that's the context, right? So in this course, we're going to focus explicitly on the organizational innovation. We're going to focus more and more on how do you effectively work in an organization with multiple teams. But remember, for you to be effective at this layer, you need to get better at the team layer and you need to get better at the individual layer. So you cannot really innovate if you're not really innovative individually, as in you're not driven as a leader. Then you absolutely forget about innovation outside. You have to be mastering your inner self, mastering your team dynamics, meaning managing down and making sure all of your team members are empowered. You build trust with them, and then finally you can expand up, right? So this is the context in which we are. And innovation happens typically at the organization or the outer layer, but it requires the skill sets of the individual, the leader in you, and it requires the team to be trusted and work in ways that people have empathy, they listen to each other, they work in a coherent fashion. So all of those layers are actually needed for you to innovate. So this context is very important. I spent quite a bit of time in this, but this is significantly important for you to know where we are going to operate and focus in this class, which is in this layer. But this layer, as you see, it's actually including all three layers, right? So there are two prerequisites. If I were to summarize this slide again, you need to really master your individual inner self by leadership communication, presence, authentic self. You need to build trust with your team members, and using all of that, you can actually start to innovate, which is the subject of this matter. So this is the context of innovation. And it all starts here. It all starts with a reflection. You need to find out what is it that you want to do, and who is your real self, as to what are your values. What is it that your life has been so far? So you start with yourself, find out what your values are. What is it that are significant accomplishments that you have? And then what are some of the intentions of the future that you want to manifest? So this is huge. And there's only this slide, but here a typical exercise would be where you would actually make space for yourself. It's not often that people make space for reflection. This is the time when you spend at least half an hour to 45 minutes. Take a white piece of paper or online on a slideshow. Reflect on some of your key events of your life. What is it that has been most memorable, most impactful, the contributions that you're proud of? Put them all down. It could be words, it could be images. And that's the foundation. And you will also start to see some areas around what is it that you value. It'll come out because those are some of the memories that drive you. So this is again the foundation. Remember, This is the inner. So this is starting with the inner, very brief warm up where you start to reflect on who your authentic self is in terms of your values. And then frame your intentions for the future. This is another piece of paper where you try to find out what are some of the things that you want to do, or what are some of the challenges that you're facing. It could be, what is the future of work look like for my team? Should they be remote? Should they be hybrid? Should they be coming on site? Should I be hiring people at a different salary level? There's so many questions you might have for the future. And so you want to start identifying what is your top intention that you want to get deeper and innovate in, right? So this is important. The slide goes quick, but this requires at least 45 minutes of an exercise where you reflect on your life, on your values, internally look at what you value, but then maybe also do an external validation, like think about the 3 people that you value the most and why do you value them. But do them as 2 different exercises, and you will see quickly that there may be some areas that are your present strength and some areas of your future strengths that you want to build. So take the time, be creative, build this collage of life values so far and the intentions of the future, your goals, your aspirations, the decisions. It could be personal, it could be work related, where you say, hey, I want to grow my customer base from X to Y, from 1,000 to 5,000. It could be, I want to increase my push-up strength, or whatever that goal is that you have, right? Take the time. This is the most important, because this is what you're going to be focusing on the rest of the slides. I've not given my personal example here, but you get the drill, right? Even if you just Google life collage, life values and intentions, this requires time with yourself, reflection. And so do this, spend as much time as possible, because once you decide on this, that's when you can use the rest of this content. So now we're going to find out what are some of the tools that we can use for innovation, right? Design thinking is one such tool set that we can use. And if you see this x-axis and y-axis, there are concrete experiences that we might have, and there may be abstract conceptualization. So something that's abstract and something that's concrete, and something that is active as to how you do it, and something that may be reflective. Right, so now let's start to learn some of the tools. And the first tool that we can use for solving the problem or the goal or the intention that we have, that we saw in this area, is design thinking. So design thinking is about figuring out how to make progress into problems that are so difficult to solve. But the way you solve this is by an iterative process. So the iterative process for design thinking goes into these 4 steps. Step 1 is to observe and notice. Observe and notice where you are, what is the problem that you're trying to solve. Then try to understand that problem from different lenses. Make and question the assumptions. Then you try to find out different solutions, where you imagine and design certain solutions that may or may not work. And you validate that by running an experiment with a prototype. And this is an iterative process which designers use. Designers are very skilled at solving difficult problems. So when we have those intentions of the future that we want to solve, we could use some of this iterative prototype-based model from our designers. And they use this in design thinking. So an iterative process like this helps us to get a deep understanding of the customer problem. Let's say you want to expand your customer base. Then you really want to understand what are some of the pain points of your customers. You want to understand them way more than what they understand. So deep understanding of the problem is the first step. That is where you observe and notice, right? And then you try to frame and reframe the problem that you're trying to solve and the assumptions that you have that don't allow you to solve that problem. What stops you? Why is it that's important for the customer? So you keep asking and you keep layering up the web of abstractions where you try to find out, hey, what is it? Why is this problem important? And you keep asking the whys. You keep asking them, and you'll quickly realize what is the job the person's trying to do, or what the customer's trying to do. So that's where you keep asking the assumptions. And you also go down and you layer down the web of web of abstractions where you try to find out, hey, what are the things that are stopping us? What is it that is not causing this problem to be solved? So that's where you question the assumptions and get to the why, real why. And then you start to brainstorm. You do once you've got those insights, you try to brainstorm solutions and find out what are all the experiences that would help solve that problem, or what are some of the pain points would be solved. So you find out and imagine those solution areas, and you try to prototype and experiment, and you're okay to embrace failures and learn from it. So the thing is, everyone in the team has a different strength. Some of them might be really good at observing and noticing. Some of them might be really good at framing and reframing, questioning the assumptions, going deep. Some of them might be really good at imagining different solutions to the problems that once we get a deeper understanding. And some of them might be just like, hey, tell me what I need to do. I'm going to go build it, right? So prototyping and experimenting. So you need to understand what are your strengths, and you need to understand what are your team's strengths. And so we did this, and I think what we found out is I'm really good at assimilating and converging, and these are my superpowers, this will help to find out your strengths as leaders, and it'll also help you find out your team members' strengths. And you want to find a team or build a team which has complementary skills, so that we can go from diverging ideas to assimilating to converging to accommodating, right? Where we are actually like building very, very quickly and building those experiences in the prototype, right? So this is a new mindset. This is a new mindset where we now have a tool that we can use from our fellow designers, finding out, being more curious about how to solve the problem, framing and reframing the problem to get a deeper understanding, collaborating on different solution sets, and being very mindful as to where we are in the process. Are we trying to, get more ideas, or are we trying to converge into ideas, and we take action with prototypes, and we are okay to fail. Experiments, we should name these as experiments, because when they're experiments, you're okay to fail. So this is the first tool set that we learned: design thinking mindset. And there's lots of things to learn here, right? We would go from building, taking interviews from our stakeholders to really observe and notice. Really want to have a direct connection with your stakeholders to find out how you're going to solve that problem, right? And you want to build the system map to find out, like, hey, what are some of the areas where the problem is or where it's not. So the concrete action in this first step of observe and notice is to take interviews. The concrete action in the second step is to build a system map based on all the insights you've learned from the interviews. The third concrete step of imagine and design is to build options, alternatives, and find out like what concepts, what solutions work. And finally, converging towards like, hey, we're going to try out this idea, and we're going to learn from the experiment. So that's the design thinking process. And you will learn quite a bit in terms of how you frame, reframe, how you talk to your customers, where you find the leverage points, and how you question your riskiest assumptions. How do you take really good interviewing? How do you do really good interviews? How do you build prototypes effectively, and so on. The second tool set that we learn is system thinking. For us to build a systems map, we'll have to learn quite a bit of skills around how do you build maps, how do we think from a systems perspective, not in isolation, not in a disconnected way, but an interconnected way, not from a linear A causes B to a more like connected system way, to understand the system slightly better, how we understand those relationships that exist in the system map and find out which are the positive loops, which are the negative loops. So understanding the system is very important so that you are not in a silo. And this helps us, especially when there are stakeholders that are involved, right? You will need to work with them. So if your actions are going to most likely impact your stakeholders, you want to make sure that it's actually impacting them in a better way. And so that's the second tool set. And the third tool set that we learn is ethnographic study, where you actually try to find out what is the job the customer is trying to do. You observe, you interview, and you question. And in the observation, how you observe, what kind of questions you ask them, and what kind of knowledge you build by actually seeing how they do what they do and the kind of job that they're trying to do. These tool sets help us: design thinking, systems thinking, doing ethnographic studies, doing effective interviews will help us understand the concept fully instead of in a very siloed fashion. Once we do that, we will have to conduct interviews, and the interviews need to be done in such a way that people don't have their guards on. So there are lots of really interesting questions that we can start in such a way that makes people feel comfortable. And in the course, we learned about the grand tour questions, where you actually try to get them from a larger lens of questions and then try to get deeper towards what you're trying to ask, and make the interview in such a way that people open up and they want to open up, because you are trying to not get straight to the problem, but like trying to really understand the context of the person you're trying to interview, understand and empathize where they come from, and you get to specific examples over a course of time. So interviewing is a pretty important skill set that we learn from this course. And finally, we will have to make choices. There's going to be a step where we are diverging with setting a lot of ideas and generating options, but at some point we'll have to converge and select certain set of options. And remember, you will not have time to do all the prototypes. You'll have to select. You'll have to make choices. Same for your life. And hopefully the choices that we make, and this slide is really important from the course that I got, is those choices that you make come from a deep sense of who you are. So that's fulfilling, right? So same for your team. Make sure that the choices that are converged after the team has contributed and their ideas are on the table. So making sure those idea generation involves everyone, that everyone's heard, but then there's a clear idea of like, hey, we are converging. Even if your idea is not selected, we're going to go move on. And so diverging and converging, those are the two. Innovate, we will have to make tough choices. Hopefully those tough choices come after you have diverged and gotten many creative ideas from your entire team, that your team feels that their ideas were considered, and eventually you converge on a idea or a set of ideas that are the top candidates. So basically, you're trying to go from your current state to your desired end state, and your hypothesis has to be tested. So diverging, making sure in the first meeting the agenda is very clear that, hey, we are here to discuss, brainstorm, we are open, considering ideas. And in the second meeting, you can say, hey, we are focused, concentrated, and trying to narrow down the winning idea, right? So when you do that, when you involve your entire team for considering everyone's ideas, and when you truly consider everyone's ideas and look for their merits, then even if their ideas are not considered, you will have them bought in, meaning you will have your teams buy in to actually help you validate the idea that was chosen as the winner, right? So the way to think about these two meetings separately is important. Don't diverge and converge hopefully in the same meeting, because then it's like an exercise that we did in the class, which was pretty amazing. You raise your hands top up, you will quickly see opening up. When you open up, new ideas come in, right? Your hands are out. But when you scoot and when you bend down to touch your feet, you will see that it's narrowing down, right? So it's diverging, converging. So that exercise also gets people to really understand and articulate this. And I felt that was a fantastic exercise that Vivek did in class. And so that's a pretty good reminder for us to remember to separate these two, because they're two different intentions. The thought process is different. Even the body opens up versus closed down, right? So innovation depends on how you pick the best ideas. And in that process, right, hopefully you want to get to a state where it's not I versus you in terms of, hey, this idea, I think of this idea, you think about the idea from this different lens, versus you're both on this one side and you're trying to think of the same idea. So that framing was something I really liked. It was brought up as a description in the class, but I feel that this image really captures it, versus like I versus you and the idea is somewhere separate. We're both attacking the idea from a different lens, versus the frame of we're both on the same side, we're in the same team trying to attack this idea, which is separate than us, right? And so hopefully those choices are keeps your team intact. Finally, you will have to tell your stories. There's no better way to do this in, without you really feeling your story. So when you want to convince someone, you really want them to be bought in. And it's an emotional, heart level appeal, not just the brain level appeal. So, how you tell your stories, how you really connect with your audience at a personal level, something that touches them, something that is personal to you, that you're vulnerable, something that surprises them because now you've shared something that they didn't know. So, something that brings people in. That aspect of storytelling, pacing yourself, taking the pauses, observing your audience, how they're reacting, very, very important. And so we learned about importance of storytelling, almost a 3-hour session, huge, practicing storytelling, pacing, practicing, and then personal. The 3 P's that I remember from this storytelling exercise was, it has to be personal aspect at the very beginning, brings people in. You got to pace yourself to make sure that you use pauses, that you're keeping your audience together, your tone of either adding more color or advance, right? That's another thing that we learned, so that you're keeping your audience totally connected with you. And then practice, right? So personal, pace, and practice. Personal, pace, practice. 3 things, very important. And remember to adapt your delivery based on adding more color or advance based on your audience. And we learned about this storyboarding one pager that was really amazing by David Reamer, who did this storytelling session with us. And it starts with the protagonist. You need to understand, like, what is the customer, the pain point, what is the insight you have about the customer, what problem do they face today, how is it that you propose to alleviate that problem, and what is the solution, and what's the alternatives out there. For example, the customer I'm trying to solve for on the side on weekends is a customer, is a student who's feeling helpless. So that's my protagonist. Helpless because they want to learn, they have the time and energy to learn, but they're not they don't have access to good material where they can learn. Maybe they don't have access to good teachers who could teach, because not all professors know how to teach. They might be really good at their skill, but they might not know how to connect with their audience. So that's the problem definition. What's the value proposition? I'll create short, real life, practical videos, because not all skill can be learned in an abstract fashion. You got to make it real. So that's the value proposition. Short videos, you can easily learn them. And the way it works is at your own pace. And so upload it, it's free to use. What are the alternatives? You got to go to the office hours for teaching, for learning from versus at your own pace, right? So that's my story. I gave you the 6 different insights of how I broke it down, and I used it during that session. But storyboarding, having a consistent structure, gets you to really do this quickly instead of trying to figure out, oh, this is a big problem. Or so if you break it down into the 6, you can quickly get to your story and nail it. All right, and finally, like I keep saying finally, but there are a few more slides, so stick with me. Experimentation. Give yourself the permission to fail. Remember, no innovation is success on day one. You should be okay to fail, because that is an experiment. Remember when we were young, we used to run so many experiments in a chemistry lab, and that was totally okay. We don't expect everything to work. So take action, get biased towards action, and allow yourself the freedom that it's okay to fail. It was an experiment. You learned. Do it. Don't think too much. Small, quick way to test the hypothesis is the best way, because that's real for you. That's one of the biggest takeaway I took from this class, which is to experiment, figure out the low-cost way to find out what you're trying to do for your customer, for yourself, in your career, in your advancement. Figure out a small way. If you really like teaching, figure out like how you get to be a teaching assistant. If you want to, if you want to be at a college, then you start associating with the college and things like that, right? So you want to just get into the process and experiment and work your way through it. There is no golden rule that you'll always find a winning one, but one of them will work. And finally, see, so improve your craft, right? This is the second last point, right? We have 10 points. The way you improve your craft, excuse me, is to meet new people who are much better than you, get inspiration. At the Innovation Week, I actually met and built two really good connections. Kursat, who was our GSI, and also Torser, who I'm going to meet. But they also gave us a reminder that there are many really good TED Talks out there. There are really good influencers who write really good books. So meet people, learn from their experiences, and really contribute. If you give your best, right, you will 100% get 2x the return, is what I've absolutely realized. So if you genuinely contribute, you're going to be fine, but constantly improve your craft. And in the meet, I also got to do a lot of one-on-ones with the professor, and with Professor Sarah I was talking about, and she shared this such an amazing future vision of education, and I was so amazed to have that 1 hour with her. And then you learned quite a bit. We learned about, like, in the one-on-one sessions that you and I, or many of us, would have had in that week. We would have learned so much deep, and I learned about the future of education, and then how she put this together. So meet people, build connections, go deep with your one-on-ones, and really invest in your relationships. And that ends with, like, that topic ends with books. We had 3 books, and I didn't read all of them. I read some parts of each of them. So Soul in the Computer by was one of the professors, Barbara Wong, who actually taught us. And Thinking in Systems 100% helps us with getting an overview of systems thinking. So absolute must read. And then Design Method, right? Really good book, because we remember the 4 quadrants. It's all in detail given in this book. So highly encourage reading books, and also really good articles. That one of the big ones that I really liked in this class was Job to be Done in the Harvard Business Review. It was a really good one that I shared. So read, improve your craft. And Barbara Wogg shared this one, which was so good. Like, this quote. I forget the name of this influencer who was, all I remember was that he influenced Martin Luther King, and he said this, and this image. He said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Don't ask what the world needs." Like, people tell us, right? Like, hey, find out where the need is, where is your passion, and then that intersection, right? He's saying, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive. Ask what makes you come alive, and go do it. Yeah, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. This is so true, right? Figuring out what makes you happy is very important. And then, as much aligned you are with your vision for life, with the limited number of heartbeats that you have on this earth, what is it that you really want to do, right? Do it. And innovation helps you experiment and do things, so that you can build a personal experience of what does it mean to, how does it feel, or what does it mean to be alive. You will realize, you will do things, you will learn through doing things that make you feel really good, in a state of trance, in a state of losing track of time, in a state where you feel a sense of purpose, feel a sense of contribution. And it's not gonna come on day one. I'll tell you, like, so many years I've been trying, haven't yet arrived, but I think I've now the glimpse of several things that really make me come alive. So I'm gonna go experiment and do them. So likewise, innovation hopefully helps us come alive. So these are the 10 really interesting things that we have seen, right? Context, inner, other, outer. Remember that we built on the muscle of reflection, so that we take and build time and space for ourselves. Framing, right? What are those intentions, and how would you frame them? Tools that we've used and built around system thinking, design thinking, and many more, doing interviews to getting to deeper with your customers, how to diverge and converge on ideas, ladder up and ladder down. Ask yourself, why is that important and what's stopping you, right? Inspirational storytelling, the 3 P's, right? Personal, pace, practice. Experiment, prototype. Okay for experiments to fail. That was the biggest tip Corinne, who's my team member, gave me, and that was such a gift. And improve your craft. Talk to the people in the industry, connect with them, get better, and hopefully you come alive to some experiments that you really like. So extremely grateful to all the professors here, Sarah, Vivek, anti-clockwise, Sarah, Vivek, Barbara, and Rachel. Amazing, hats off, great effort, helped us build tools so that we can be set up for innovation, helped us understand design thinking, systems thinking, got us deeper in terms of giving ourselves the space to think in a much broader way and giving us tools to come alive. So couldn't be more thankful. So thank you for the class, and good luck innovating, innovators.